The Galactic Empire was old. It had stretched across thousands of star systems for more than 10,000 years. Its fleets were made of giant ships, each one so large that it could block out the stars when it passed above a planet. The Empire believed there was no force in the galaxy that could resist it. Worlds had fallen one after another, and many species now served under its banners. To the rulers of the Empire, everything outside their borders was either a resource to take or a threat to crush. When scouts first reported the existence of humans, the Empire did not take the matter seriously. Humanity was a young race, only just reaching into the stars. They had begun to colonize nearby planets, but their ships looked small and plain compared to the grand vessels of the Empire. The High Council, made up of the most powerful lords, laughed when they heard of Earth's new colonies. To them, humans were nothing more than children playing with tools they did not understand. Yet the reports kept coming. Human ships were moving beyond their own system. They had built outposts on moons and stations in deep space. Their speed of progress was unusual. Within only a few decades, they had achieved what took other species centuries. The High Council did not like surprises, and so they decided to act. The order was simple. A fleet would travel to the human home system, Sul, and show the humans the power of the Empire. No battle was expected. The display alone would be enough to make them surrender. After all, every other young race had surrendered before. Why would this one be any different? The fleet they sent was not small. Hundreds of ships traveled together, their silver hulls shining as they moved through the dark. At the center was the flagship, Imperious Dawn, commanded by Lord Admiral Saran, a proud and strict officer who had crushed many rebellions. He believed the mission would be easy. He would arrive, demand surrender, and then return with another victory to add to his record. When the fleet entered the edge of the Sol system, Saran stood on the bridge and looked at the blue star ahead. He could see planets turning around it, each one glowing faintly on the screens. Earth was one of those. Worlds. He wondered what kind of people lived there. In his mind, they would be like all others, nervous, weak, and eager to kneel before the Empire. The officers around him whispered about the humans. Some said they were bold. Others said they were reckless. A few even suggested they might resist. Saran dismissed these words. Resistance from a young species was nothing new. It had happened before, and it always ended the same way. The Empire crushed them, and then the survivors were brought into the system as servants. The fleet moved closer. As the ships passed through the outer edge of the system, they crossed near Pluto. Drones from Earth detected them and sent warnings back to the inner worlds. On Earth itself, leaders and generals watched their screens as the massive Imperial fleet appeared. For the first time, the Terran fleet prepared to face an enemy far greater in number and reputation. On the Imperious Dawn, Lord Admiral Saran ordered the communications link to open. He wanted to speak directly to the humans. A human admiral soon appeared on the screen. His name was Yun, a man with calm eyes and a steady voice. Saran introduced himself in the name of the Empire, declaring that the humans must surrender their worlds, their fleets, and their independence. He promised that if they obeyed, the Empire would allow them to survive as part of its vast domain. The human admiral listened without a word. When Saran finished, Yun gave a small nod. He did not look afraid. In fact, there was something strange in his expression, something that Saran could not place. It was not defiance exactly, Nor was it fear. It was closer to amusement, as if Yun was holding back a smile. This unsettled Saran more than he wished to admit. He had expected begging or panic. Instead, he saw a man who looked as though the Empire's threats were nothing unusual. Still, Saran pushed aside the thought. Perhaps humans simply did not understand the scale of the power before them. Soon, they would. The order was given for the Imperial ships to form a grand display. Rows of battleships aligned. Carriers opened their bays, and dreadnoughts shined their energy cannons. The stars seemed to vanish behind the metal wall of the fleet. It was a sight meant to break spirits, a sight that had made countless species surrender before. But the humans did not surrender. Their fleet appeared from the shadow of Mars, small compared to the Empire's armada, yet steady in formation. There were not hundreds of ships, only dozens. Their hulls were simple, their weapons smaller. To the eyes of the Empire, they looked fragile. Yet they did not retreat. Admiral Yun spoke again, his voice calm and even. He thanked the Empire for its message, but said humanity did not bow. He added that the Terran fleet would defend its world, no matter how great the enemy. Then he smiled, just slightly. Lord Admiral Saran frowned. He could not understand why the humans were smiling. It was not the expression of a defeated race. It was something else entirely, something that made even the most confident officers on the Imperious Dawn uneasy. And so, the Empire's great arrival at Seoul was not met with surrender, but with a quiet smile from a people who seemed far too calm for their situation. For the first time in many years, the Empire's admirals felt a shadow of doubt. The two fleets faced each other in the Sol system. On one side stood the Grand Armada of the Galactic Empire, hundreds of ships aligned in perfect order, their silver hulls gleaming as if the stars themselves obeyed them. On the other side was the Terran fleet, smaller in number, simpler in design, but steady, calm, and unmoved by the threat before them. On the bridge of the Imperious Dawn, Lord Admiral Saran watched the Terran ships with sharp eyes. He felt irritation rising within him. Humans were not reacting as expected. Other young races, when faced with the Empire's power, either begged for mercy or fled in panic. Yet the humans remained in formation, showing no sign of fear. It was as if they had been waiting for this very moment. "Open the channel again," Saran ordered. The screen flickered, and once more the human admiral appeared. Yun stood at ease, hands behind his back, his uniform plain compared to the elaborate robes of the Empire's commanders. His eyes, however, were steady and sharp, and his face carried that same strange calm as before. "Admiral Yun," Saran said with authority, "you are outmatched. Your fleet is small. Your weapons are weak, and your defenses cannot withstand us. The High Council has declared humanity will now serve the Empire. Surrender your worlds and your fleets at once, and you may be spared destruction." The human admiral nodded slowly, as if listening to a teacher. Then he spoke in a voice both polite and firm. "We thank you for your message, but humanity does not kneel. We are free, and we intend to remain free. If you wish to test us, then know this: we will defend our home, whatever the cost." His words were not loud, nor filled with anger. They were calm, measured, and without fear. But at the end of his statement, his lips curved in the faintest smile. It was not mockery. It was not arrogance. It was something different. Something that unsettled the entire Imperial bridge. Saran's officers exchanged glances. Some frowned. Others whispered. The humans' behavior made no sense. A small fleet should not stand so boldly before the most powerful force in the galaxy. Yet here he was, smiling as if the Empire's might was nothing more than a test. Saran forced himself to remain steady. "Very well," he said coldly. "Then you leave us no choice. The Empire will show you mercy if you submit now. Refuse, and your fleet will be destroyed." Admiral Yun simply replied, "Then let us see what happens." The channel closed. Silence filled the bridge of the Imperious Dawn. Saran clenched his hands behind his back. He had faced rebellions, uprisings, and resistant worlds before, but none had ever spoken with such quiet certainty. He had expected shouting, fear, or desperate pleas. Instead, he had received calm words and a smile. "Admiral," said one of his officers carefully, "they do not seem afraid." "They are fools," Saran replied sharply, though his voice lacked the weight of conviction. Across the system, the Terran fleet remained still. Their ships, though smaller, were positioned with careful precision. Each one seemed to cover the other, forming a shield-like formation. Their movements were minimal, as if they had already prepared their strategy. On Earth, millions of people watched the broadcast. The Empire's fleet had appeared like a storm, its size unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Yet when they saw Admiral Yun stand firm and speak with calm, many felt their own fear fade. If their admiral could face such power without trembling, then perhaps humanity truly had a chance. On the Imperious Dawn, Saran made his decision. "Prepare a strike," he ordered. "We will test their defenses. A single wave will be enough to show them the difference between us." Dozens of Imperial ships moved forward, their weapons glowing with energy. The stars flickered as beams of power shot across the darkness toward the Terran fleet. It was a strike meant to cripple, not to destroy. Saran wanted to humble them. First, to make their surrender all the more certain. But something unexpected happened. The Terran ships did not scatter. They did not fall apart. Instead, they moved with speed and coordination that seemed impossible for such a young race. Their vessels shifted in patterns that looked chaotic at first, yet every movement placed them exactly where they needed to be. Shields flared, weapons fired, and the Imperial strike was blunted in moments. Even more surprising, the humans fired back. Their weapons were smaller, their blasts thinner than the Empire's beams, but every shot struck true. Where the Empire fired in grand volleys that lit up space, the humans fired with surgical precision. A single Terran cannon shot crippled an Imperial frigate, striking a weak point the Empire thought no one could find. On the bridge of the Imperious Dawn, officers gasped as reports came in. "Frigate down. 2 destroyers disabled. Shields pierced. On the carrier, Vornak." Saran's eyes widened. Impossible. Their weapons should not have such accuracy. Yet the evidence was plain. The Terran fleet had survived the first strike with minimal damage, and in return had inflicted losses far beyond expectation. The human admiral reappeared on the screen for a brief moment. He looked at Saran calmly and said only one thing. "Now." "You know." Then the screen went dark again. On Earth, cheers erupted as news spread that the first Imperial strike had been turned aside. For the first time in history, humanity had faced the most powerful fleet in the galaxy and had not broken. Instead, they had smiled. And in that moment, The officers of the Empire began to feel something they had not known in centuries. Not anger, not pride, but doubt. The first clash between the fleets had ended, and the result shocked the Empire. What was supposed to be a simple demonstration of power had instead exposed cracks in their confidence. Humanity had survived the first strike, and worse, they had struck back with frightening precision. On the bridge of the Imperious Dawn, silence hung heavy. Officers stared at their screens, unsure of what to say. Lord Admiral Saran's face was calm, but his eyes burned with frustration. He could not understand how a small fleet of primitives could resist the most advanced ships in the galaxy. They were lucky, Saran said firmly, as much to himself as to the others. A single exchange does not decide a war. Prepare the next wave. But deep inside, he felt a shadow of doubt. The humans had not moved in panic. Their actions had not been random. They had fought with a strange order that was difficult to follow, as if they had rehearsed this moment many times before. Meanwhile, aboard the flagship of the Terran fleet, Admiral Yun stood quietly as his crew reported the results of the battle. Their ships had taken only light damage, while several Imperial vessels were now out of action. The crew looked to him with hope in their eyes. Yun gave a small nod. "They expected us to fear them," he said calmly. "Instead, they now begin to fear us." The Terran fleet had spent years preparing for this day. Humanity had studied the Empire long before the Empire noticed them. Quietly, through signals, trade routes, and captured fragments of data, humans had learned about Imperial tactics, weapons, and weaknesses. Their fleet was smaller, yes, but every ship was designed with purpose. Every captain knew their role, and most importantly, humanity had learned to adapt faster than anyone else. Back on the Imperious Dawn, Saran ordered his second strike. A larger group of Imperial ships moved forward, dreadnoughts leading with their heavy cannons. The sky lit up once more as beams of energy rushed toward the human line. This time, the Empire did not aim to humble. They aimed to crush. But again, the humans moved with uncanny precision. Their ships shifted at the exact right moment. Shields, overlapping to absorb blasts, engines firing in bursts that carried them out of danger. Where an Imperial admiral would move fleets in grand, predictable formations, the humans moved like a school of fish, flowing and changing in ways that seemed chaotic, yet always purposeful. "Admiral," an Imperial officer cried, "their movement patterns. Our targeting systems cannot keep up." Saran gritted his teeth. "Then fire everything. Overwhelm them." The sky exploded with energy as the Empire unleashed its full strength. Yet, the Terran fleet continued to endure. And then, they struck back. This time, their hidden strength began to show. From behind the human line, larger vessels emerged, ships the Empire's scanners had failed to detect. They had been hidden in the shadow of asteroids, silent and cold, waiting for the right moment. Their engines flared to life, and their weapons lit the void. "Where did those come from?" shouted an Imperial commander. The hidden ships were, not many, but each one was powerful, armed with weapons designed to pierce even the thickest shields. Energy lances shot forward, striking Imperial cruisers at their weak points. In moments, more Imperial ships were disabled or destroyed. On the Imperious Dawn, Saran felt his chest tighten. The humans had planned this. They had baited him with their smaller fleet, then revealed more strength at the perfect time. Admiral Yun reappeared briefly on the communications screen, his face calm, his eyes sharp. "You think us weak because we are young," he said. "But we have learned quickly, and we have prepared." Then the screen went dark again. In the control chambers of the Empire's fleet, officers began to murmur in fear. Never before had a young species resisted like this. Never before had one revealed such hidden strength. Their commanders had always been predictable, but humanity was not. Humanity fought with imagination. On Earth, people listened to reports of the battle with growing hope. For decades, they had worked together, setting aside differences to build a united defense. Many had doubted if their sacrifices would matter when the day came. Now they saw the answer. Their fleets were holding. The Empire, which had seemed like an unstoppable storm, was being slowed, even bloodied, by human hands. The Terran fleet pressed forward. Smaller ships darted in and out of the battle, striking at the sides of Imperial cruisers. Hidden weapons, once thought impossible for a young race to build, fired with deadly accuracy. Humanity had turned the Empire's arrogance into their weapon, using surprise and precision to balance the scales. On the imperious dawn, Saran finally spoke through clenched teeth. "This is not chance. This is not luck. They have prepared for us." For the first time in his long career, Saran felt something he had never known in battle: uncertainty. The humans had not been caught off guard. They had been waiting. And as the clash raged on, the truth became clear to all who watched. Humanity was not a weak race stumbling into the stars. Humanity was a new force rising with speed the galaxy had never seen. The Empire had come to teach them fear. Instead, the Empire had found itself staring at the hidden strength of Earth and the quiet smile of a people who refused to kneel. The battle in the Sol system grew heavier with each passing moment. The Empire had thrown wave after wave of firepower against the Terran fleet, expecting resistance to crumble. Yet the humans continued to fight with a calm that unsettled even the most hardened Imperial officers. On the bridge of the Imperious Dawn, Lord Admiral Saran stood tall, but inside his thoughts were restless. He had believed the first clash would bring humanity to its knees. Instead, he had watched his own ships fall to precise and unexpected counterstrikes. Every time the Empire attacked, the humans adapted. Every time the Empire thought it had the upper hand, the Terran fleet revealed another surprise. "They are not breaking," one officer whispered, staring at the screens that displayed the human ships holding formation. "No," Saran replied sharply, "but they will." His words sounded certain, yet deep inside he was no longer sure. Meanwhile, aboard the Terran flagship Resolute, Admiral Yun observed the field with quiet eyes. Reports flowed in. Damage was minimal, the fleet was still in good shape, and their hidden reserve ships had successfully struck the Empire. The crew looked to him for direction, and he simply nodded. His calm nature spread across the room like steady light in a storm. "They will not understand us until the end," Yun said, softly. "They cannot imagine a people who smile in the face of power." At that moment, a message came from the Empire. The screen flickered, and Saran's image appeared before Yun. The Imperial Admiral's face was stern, his golden armor shining, but there was tension in his eyes. "You have resisted longer than expected," Saran admitted, "but your situation is hopeless. The Empire commands not hundreds, but thousands of ships. Even if you win here, more fleets will come. Your people cannot survive endless war. Yield now, and you may be spared." His voice was calm, yet behind it lay desperation. He needed the humans to surrender, to make sense of this battle. "Admiral," Yun listened, his hands folded behind his back. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, a smile touched his lips. "Admiral Saran," he said, his voice steady, "you speak as though we are afraid of death. You think we resist because we do not understand your strength. But we resist because we understand it fully, and it does not frighten us." The smile remained, quiet and unshaken. It was not arrogance, nor mockery. It was the smile of a people who had already accepted the cost of freedom. Saran stared at the screen, unsettled. He had faced many enemies, but none had ever smiled while standing before the Empire's full might. That smile spread unease across the Imperial bridge. Officers shifted uncomfortably, as if something invisible pressed down on them. Yun continued, "We are not the strongest fleet in the galaxy, but we are the most determined. Every human standing today knows what is at risk. Every human behind us knows this fight decides our future. You see weakness in our numbers, but we see strength in our unity. That is why we smile." Then the channel closed. On the imperious dawn, silence returned. The smile of the human admiral played again and again in Saran's mind. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps the Empire had made a mistake in thinking humanity was just another young race. Moments later, the Terran fleet expanded formation. From behind Earth's moon and hidden positions in the asteroid belt, more ships emerged. They were not as many as the Empire's fleet, but their sudden arrival shocked the Imperial officers. The humans had hidden them carefully, waiting for the right moment to reveal their true numbers. "They had more ships all along," one officer said in disbelief. "They planned this," another whispered. Saran's chest tightened. Every move the humans had made now appeared deliberate, part of a larger strategy. They had not been hiding out of fear. They had been waiting, studying, and preparing. The Terran fleet now stood stronger, their lines bold and their weapons glowing. Humanity had shown its hidden strength, and with it came that unsettling smile. The same smile that seemed to say, "We are ready for whatever comes." On Earth, billions watched the broadcasts. People who had feared annihilation now saw their fleets standing tall. They saw their admirals and captains speaking with courage. They saw their species not as prey, but as a rising force. Across cities and colonies, people smiled as well, mirroring the expression of Admiral Yun. For generations, the Empire had ruled with fear, but now humanity answered fear with calm and terror with amusement. It was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. The battle resumed. Imperial ships moved forward, trying to crush the Terran fleet with overwhelming firepower. Yet again, the humans countered with speed and precision. Their weapons struck weak points with uncanny accuracy. Their ships moved in ways the Empire's computers struggled to predict, and through it all, humanity smiled. It was a small thing, but it carried great weight. To the Empire, it was disturbing. To humanity, it was a symbol. They were not afraid. They were not defeated. They were free, and they intended to remain free. By the end of the clash, more Imperial ships had fallen, and the Terran fleet still held strong. Lord Admiral Saran stood in silence on his bridge, watching the human formation across the void. For the first time in centuries, an Imperial commander felt not victory, but doubt. The humans were smiling, and the galaxy would soon learn why. The Sol system burned with light as the battle reached its height. The Galactic Empire had sent one of its proudest fleets to humble humanity, yet now that fleet was bleeding under the strikes of a people who refused to bow. The stars around Earth were filled with flashes of fire, streaks of energy, and the debris of fallen ships drifting silently into the void. On the bridge of the imperious dawn, Lord Admiral Saran's jaw tightened. He had never faced such resistance. The humans were not only surviving, they were turning the fight into something dangerous. For every Imperial ship that fell, whispers of doubt grew louder among his crew. "This cannot continue," Saran said, his voice heavy. "We are the Empire. We will not be broken by a small world." He ordered all wings to advance. Hundreds of Imperial ships surged forward in perfect formation, a wall of fire and steel. Dreadnoughts fired their massive cannons, carriers released. Swarms of fighters and destroyers raced ahead to surround the humans. On the Terran flagship Resolute, Admiral Yun remained calm. His officers reported the enemy advance, their voices tense, but Yun did not falter. "They are fighting as they always do," he said. "Orderly, predictable, proud. That is their weakness. We will answer with chaos, and in chaos we will find victory." The Terran fleet shifted at once. Unlike the rigid Imperial lines, the human ships scattered into unpredictable groups. Some darted close, weaving between Imperial cruisers. Others vanished into the shadows of moons and asteroids, waiting to strike at the right moment. Their movements looked wild, almost reckless, but behind it was careful planning. When the Imperial wall of ships closed around them, the humans struck. Small Terran corvettes darted in at impossible angles, firing at weak spots the Empire had long ignored. Fighters swarmed in waves, not in neat formations, but in patterns the Imperial computers could not follow. And from the hidden reserves, more Terran vessels revealed themselves, striking like hunters at prey. Saran watched in disbelief as Imperial ships began to fall one by one. "Their attacks should not even scratch us," he muttered, but the reports told a different story. Human weapons, though smaller, were being used with deadly precision. A blast here to weaken shields, a strike there to hit exposed engines. What the Empire saw as weak weapons, humanity had turned into surgical tools. On Earth, people followed every update. Screens across cities showed the Terran fleet holding against the most powerful armada known. Families who had feared destruction now cheered as their ships struck blow after blow. For the first time in history, humanity felt not like prey, but like a force standing equal in the galaxy. Back in the battle, the clash grew fiercer. An Imperial carrier released a flood of fighters, dark shapes filling the sky like a storm. They moved fast, their weapons blazing, ready to overwhelm the Terran line. Yet the humans were ready. Their own fighters rose to meet them, not in neat lines but in swirls and spirals. The dogfights lit the void with bursts of fire, and to the shock of Imperial pilots, the humans began to win. "Impossible," one officer gasped on the imperious dawn. "Their fighters are slower, less armed, yet they are cutting through ours." Saran clenched his fists. He saw it now. The humans fought with creativity, not tradition. Where the Empire relied on centuries of routine, humanity improvised. They adapted in seconds, turned mistakes into opportunities, and used every scrap of knowledge they had gathered. On the Resolute, Admiral Yun gave new orders calmly. Shift groups 4 and 5, strike their flanks, leave an opening in the center. They will rush to fill it. The humans obeyed. The Terran fleet opened a gap in their formation. Imperial commanders saw it at once and ordered their ships forward, eager to exploit the weakness. But the weakness was a trap. As the Imperial fleet rushed in, Terran ships hidden in the shadow of Mars burst forward, striking from behind. The Imperial ships caught in the middle were torn apart before they realized what had happened. Cheers erupted aboard the Resolute. Yet Yun did not smile widely. His calm face showed only a quiet satisfaction. "They will keep coming," he reminded his crew. "But each time, they will bleed." On the imperious dawn, Saran's frustration turned into something darker. He had expected a swift victory, but instead he was losing ships, losing ground, and losing the confidence of his officers. The humans, with their strange movements and unsettling smiles, were changing the battle into something the Empire had never faced. And yet Saran could not retreat. To flee before a young race would stain the Empire's pride forever. "All ships, press forward," he ordered. "Crush them, whatever the cost." The clash grew into a storm. Space itself seemed to burn as the two fleets tore into one another. Imperial might against human determination, tradition against adaptation, pride against freedom, and in the heart of it, the humans continued to smile. Their ships danced through the fire, their captains fought with courage, and their people on Earth and beyond watched with hope. The Empire had expected surrender. Instead, they had found the clash of fleets that would change the galaxy forever. The battle had raged for hours, yet the Empire had not broken the Terran fleet. On the contrary, humanity had shown resilience that no one in the Empire had expected. Reports streamed in, each one more disturbing than the last. Imperial officers struggled to believe what their sensors were showing. Ships that should have fallen were still fighting. Attack patterns that should have worked had failed. The humans were not only surviving, they were winning. Lord Admiral Saran paced the bridge of the imperious dawn, his face tense. His pride demanded victory, yet a growing unease pressed on his chest. He had led fleets against countless foes. He had crushed rebellions, overpowered entire civilizations, and celebrated victories that were remembered for centuries. But now, staring at the calm and determined Terran fleet, he felt something foreign. Fear. "This is impossible," he muttered. "They are too small. They should have no chance against us." Yet every report proved otherwise. One of the Empire's destroyers had been cut in half by precise energy strikes. Another cruiser had lost its engines before it could retreat. Imperial fighters, launched in swarms to overwhelm the humans, had been destroyed almost as soon as they approached. Each victory the humans gained was methodical, precise, and almost effortless. "Admiral," a young officer whispered, "our fleet cannot hold much longer. They anticipate our attacks. Their moves are unpredictable in ways we cannot calculate." Saran clenched his jaw. "They are not unpredictable. They are prepared. They have learned everything about us, every trick, every weakness. They see it, and they exploit it without hesitation." He looked at the communication panel and saw the brief image of Admiral Yun appear again. The human stood calmly, as always. His expression was unreadable, yet his eyes held a quiet certainty that made Saran's stomach tighten. "You have underestimated us," Yun said softly, almost as if stating a simple fact. "The Empire believes in fear and force. We believe in preparation, unity, and courage. That is why we endure. That is why we will prevail." The screen went dark. On the bridge of the imperious dawn, Saran's officers exchanged nervous glances. This was not the first battle they had lost, yet it was the first time that failure did not feel like a mistake, but like inevitability. Humanity's calm defiance had become a force stronger than any weapon in the Empire's arsenal. Saran took a deep breath. "All ships, maintain formation. Focus fire on their command ships. If we take out their leaders, the rest will crumble." But, even as the orders were given, reports came in that the Terran fleet's command positions were well protected, hidden behind layers of smaller ships and reinforced by hidden weapons emplacements. The humans had not simply built a fleet. They had built a system of defense and offense so clever that the Empire could barely touch it. From the shadow of the asteroid belt, hidden Terran vessels struck again. Imperial warships were disabled, or destroyed before their crews even realized the attack. Energy beams tore through shields that were thought impenetrable. In minutes, the Empire's losses began to mount beyond anything Saran had expected. "Admiral, morale is dropping," an officer said quietly. "Some captains are questioning the strategy. They have never faced an enemy like this." Saran remained silent for a moment. He could feel the fear spreading through his fleet. Fear was contagious, even among the proudest of soldiers, and the humans were using that fear without firing a single shot directly at the imperious dawn. They fought with confidence, precision, and above all, the calm of those who believed victory was already theirs. In the Terran fleet, Admiral Yun observed the Empire's hesitation. Every move the humans made reinforced the psychological edge they held. They did not just fight, they projected confidence. They did not just destroy, they inspired. Across the void of space, the humans smiled as they held their ground, a small gesture that carried enormous weight. Yun knew that fear was now gripping the Empire. He had seen it in the hesitation of their fire, the miscalculations of their officers, and the small moments of doubt spreading like shadows through their ranks. The humans had not needed to defeat the entire fleet yet. They only needed to show strength, and the Empire was already faltering. Saran's hands shook slightly as he studied the tactical displays. He realized that humanity's advantage was not numbers or firepower, it was courage, strategy, and an unshakable spirit. The Empire had underestimated the humans completely, and now that underestimation was turning into panic. "Prepare all ships for the final strike," Saran said, with forced determination. "We will end this now. We cannot allow fear to spread further." Yet even as he spoke, a deep truth pressed on him. The Empire had faced countless enemies over thousands of years. Yet never before had it encountered a species that could stand so calmly, so confidently, and so cleverly against overwhelming force. Humanity was different. Humanity was dangerous, and that was when fear truly took root in the hearts of the Imperial fleet. The humans were not desperate. They were not reckless. They were smiling in the face of the most powerful force in the galaxy, and that simple act, that quiet confidence, carried a power the Empire could not destroy. The Sol system was no longer just a battlefield. It had become a mirror, showing the Empire what it had never understood: the courage and ingenuity of a species that refused to bow. The Empire was beginning to realize the truth. Humanity was not weak, not naive, not unprepared. Humanity was a force the galaxy had never known, and now the fear of facing it would change everything. The battle in the Sol system had reached a turning point. The Galactic Empire had brought its might, expecting quick victory. Yet every wave of their attacks had been met with calm precision, careful strategy, and the quiet confidence of the Terran fleet. Humanity had proven that courage, preparation, and determination could overcome even overwhelming force. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Yun observed the last Imperial formations. His fleet had taken minimal damage, and the humans had revealed hidden strength at every turn. From the outer moons to the asteroid belts, their ships had struck with deadly precision, and now the Empire was faltering. The young officers around him looked amazed, but Yun remained steady. "Hold formation," he said quietly. "Do not let pride or anger guide you. Victory is not only in destruction, it is in discipline, strategy, and courage." The Terran fleet moved with perfect coordination. Fighters darted among enemy vessels, corvettes flanked and struck at weak points, and hidden reserves appeared from the shadows of space to surprise Imperial dreadnoughts. Every move was calculated, yet the execution looked effortless. On the Imperious dawn, Lord Admiral Saran's face was pale. His pride and confidence, which had carried him through countless campaigns, now felt fragile. Reports streamed in, ships crippled, shields breached, officers uncertain. The humans had turned the battle into a demonstration of their unyielding will. "Admiral," one officer said cautiously, "they are not just defending, they are dictating the fight. Every move we make, they counter perfectly." Saran's jaw tightened. "They are not weak," he admitted, almost to himself. "They are stronger than any force I have faced, stronger than we expected, stronger than anyone expects." He looked across the void at the Terran fleet. They were smaller, their ships simpler, yet their coordination, courage, and determination made them a force that even the Empire could not ignore. The humans were no longer just defenders. They were rulers of this battle, shaping it with their strategy and skill. Admiral Yun gave new orders. "Push forward. Focus on breaking their center. Leave openings for the traps. Every attack should force them to overcommit. They cannot match our coordination." The Terran fleet advanced, not with recklessness, but with purpose. Imperial ships pressed to attack the humans, only to find themselves trapped in clever formations. Where the Empire expected panic or hesitation, they found calm execution. Every Imperial strike was met with a precise counter, and every Imperial mistake was punished immediately. From Earth and the colonies, billions watched. They saw their people holding strong, facing the mightiest fleet in the galaxy, and responding with courage and strategy. The morale of humanity soared. Even civilians far from the battlefield felt pride in their species. They were no longer vulnerable. They were a power to be reckoned with. The Imperial fleet began to falter. Ships that had once moved with confidence now hesitated, unsure of their next move. Their numbers could not compensate for the humans' cunning and discipline. Dreadnoughts were disabled, cruisers destroyed, and even some of the Empire's hidden Reserves were falling to the precise strikes of the Terran fleet. Saran felt fear creeping into his mind. He had always believed the Empire's reputation and power were enough to command surrender. But humanity had refused to bow, refused to flee, and refused to be intimidated. The Empire had underestimated them, and that mistake was now clear. On the Resolute, Yun gave the final command. Converge on their flagship, strike with precision, show them the consequences of underestimating humanity. The Terran fleet moved as one, a wave of skill, courage, and determination. Imperial ships tried to respond, but their coordination faltered under pressure. The humans had mastered the art of fighting beyond numbers. Every ship, every captain, every pilot contributed to a plan that the Empire could not break. At last, the flagship of the Imperial fleet, the Imperious Dawn, faced concentrated fire from multiple angles. Shields flared, energy cannons fired in. Defense, but human strategy had prepared for this moment. Energy beams struck weak points, engines failed, and systems shut down one after another. Lord Admiral Saran watched helplessly as his greatest vessel succumbed to the coordinated might of a fleet he had believed inferior. The battle ended not with annihilation, but with a decisive demonstration. The Empire had come to conquer humanity, and humanity had forced them to retreat. The Terran fleet remained strong, victorious not through sheer numbers but through courage, preparation, unity, and an unshakable spirit. Across the Sol system, human fleets stood tall. Soldiers, pilots, and civilians alike celebrated quietly, knowing that they had changed the galaxy forever. Humanity had not bowed. Humanity had not fled. Humanity had smiled in the face of the Empire, and in that smile they had shown the universe their strength. Lord Admiral Saran, aboard the crippled Imperious Dawn, looked at the retreating Terran fleet. For the first time, he realized something the Empire had never understood. Strength is not only measured in ships or weapons. It is measured in courage, unity, and the will to protect what is important. Humanity had risen not as a simple young species, but as a power that would be remembered for generations. And as the stars of the Sol system twinkled around Earth, one truth became clear to all who witnessed it. The galaxy had changed, and humanity's smile would echo across the stars for centuries to come.